Welcome to Talakayan. In this episode, we will look into the ethics that is involved in communication, specifically the kind of communication that happens by means of social media, which of course is made possible by the highly advanced information and communications technology that we have today. And we will talk about morality. In other words, we will talk about morality as it applies to social media communication. My name is Dennis Temporal. Friends call me Dot, that's D-O-T, and I am happy and honored to be the facilitator for today's conversation. I'm a faculty member of the Departments of Philosophy and Communication here in Ateneo, as well as a faculty member of the Ateneo Graduate School of Business. And here I teach courses related to ethics. I'm a philosopher who happens to be a communicator at heart and by personal practice. And that's why I thought a few weeks ago how it would be good for us to reflect a little bit on the relationship between social media and human behavior. These are questions that are all about people's behavior and motivation for behaving in a certain way when they communicate using digital platforms. And by people, of course, that includes all of us. For who among us in this day and age can claim ignorance concerning social media? To help us think about these questions, I have with me right now two colleagues of mine from the Ateneo Philosophy Department who are both specialists in ethics. These are two professors who have done a lot of thinking and teaching on the topic of morality. The first is Dr. Raymond Barbaza. Momok, as we fondly call him in the department, is a multi-published author who lectures and researches on Martin Heidegger, phenomenology, philosophy of the city, philosophy of technology, philosophy of language, and environmental ethics. He was formerly the chair of the Ateneo Philosophy Department as well as the acting dean of the School of Humanities here in Ateneo Loyola schools. He's also an avid and very talented photographer and cycling enthusiast. My other companion is Dr. Oscar Bulaong Jr. John is his nickname, and he teaches and writes about Immanuel Kant, moral philosophy, business ethics, and leadership. He is also the executive director of the Governor Jose B. Fernandez Jr. Ethics Center at the Ateneo Graduate School of Business. And in 2015, John became the first global Jesuit network visiting scholar who did research and materials curation at the Marcula Center for Applied Ethics over at Santa Clara University in the United States. Momok, John, welcome to Talakayan. Kamusta kayo?
Thank you, Dot. Good to be here. 2 years na. Grabe.
Masaya ako na magkakasama tayo ngayon. Kami ni Momok, 2 years na hindi nagkikita. Kami ni John, when COVID-19 numbers got better, we got in touch with some other colleagues from the philosophy department sometime mid-May. Right? So thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation to be our friends, companion in this conversation. Simulan natin. We've given everything that's happening right now all over the world when it comes to the way social media is being used. Could you, just to start us off, could you quickly comment on what so far you've been observing as the things that we should look into when it comes to the way people use social media? Behaviorally speaking, what ails social media these days? John.
I have to admit that at the beginning, I did not subscribe to IG. I found out that IG is the nickname for that when my son started talking about Instagram. No, it's only last year when I subscribed, when I had my own account for Instagram as well as, but not yet TikTok. But I'm seeing, I think a lot of the content also goes into IG. Dot, you're asking what should we pay attention to regarding social media. From my own experience, I'm waking up at 6:37 in the morning and I start by looking at IG feed. It's addictive. My own personal experience regarding that is that it is addictive because it's a barrage of stimulation. So that's my personal experience with that. And I think that's a very important starting point to think about when we think about social media.
That's a very focused point, that it's addictive. That's the effect it has on people, social media usage. Ikaw mo, kamusta ang observation mo?
I remember Dot, no? The very first time that I signed up for Facebook, tinatawanan ako ng friends ng my wife, ano, sabi nila, hindi bagay sa'yo, Facebook, hindi ka tatagal dyan, ano. And then who would have thought that I became, yun nga, sabi nga ni John, no, there's something in Facebook na may pagka-addictive, no. But, one thing I realized is nobody knew, what power, social media has, I think it's an animal that we yet have to learn how to tame, no? Diba? Who would have thought na social media like Facebook, Instagram, can change the course of history, can influence the politics, as we see in the Philippines. So, yeah.
For better or for worse, social media these days, they have really shown what they're capable of doing, right? They can influence people's ways of seeing things,
Exactly.
people's ways of seeing society, culture. And as experienced recently in the Philippines, social media can definitely influence the way we vote.
Yeah.
And so, so far, nagiging punching bag ang social media. Pagdating sa kapangyarihan nito. And so we can now move into the question of ethics. Hindi ko na papatagalin. Are there really such things as good and bad when it comes to using a medium such as social media? I mean, is there really such a thing as a bad hammer? When I'm looking at the hammer in front of me, there's a hammer in front of me. Can I really say that it's a bad instrument or a good instrument? Or does it take a human being, human agency, to make it good or bad? So treating the social media as instruments, are there really such things as good and bad when it comes to dealing with them?
You want to go ahead?
Go ahead, John.
Dot, I've thought about I love the metaphor about the hammer, diba? It's a tool. It's a neutral, mindless tool that's neither good nor bad. So I like that you asked the question, what kind of person is the one wielding or holding the hammer? Can I give a context in which we can ask that question? I wanted to start with this. I hope you don't mind then. Parang, when we start talking about social media as a tool, and then we ask the question about its moral value, can we embed that question in a 2,500-year-old story that Plato gave us in the Republic? Sorry, I hope you don't mind. I'm name dropping a philosopher.
Go ahead. They should be interesting.
But the reason I think it's important to start talking about the allegory of the cave is because we shouldn't be surprised with how social media. I mean, I'm surprised. I'm not saying I'm not surprised. But if I look back 2,500 years ago, Plato already depicted an allegory, a story of human beings inside a cave. They're all facing a wall. They're shackled. They can only watch the shadows on a wall. And then there are puppeteers. I think the translation that Plato used was puppeteers. There's a fire behind the people looking at the wall on the cave, in the cave. And then there are puppeteers who are holding up artifacts. And the artifacts, I hope that's clear,
yes.
Diba? The artifacts there create the shadows on the wall.
Throw shadows on the wall.
And for the entire lives of the people in the cave, they're just watching shadows. The puppeteers, I mean, whatever translation is appropriate for that. There are people, 2,500 years ago, Plato told us already, there are people who will manipulate the way people see reality. And I think that's such a brilliant and insightful look at, a social critique, basically. I think it's a brilliant social critique by someone 2,500 years ago. And it still applies today. So when we think about social media as a medium, as a tool, I think we should look back at the puppeteers who manipulate the so-called artifacts that people watch on the wall inside the cave. And that's the reality that the people inside the cave have to not even contend with. They have to assimilate and believe to be what the really real is.
Yeah. But indeed, there are people in society today who are good at using social media. The same way that a puppeteer is good at manipulating, controlling a puppet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ikaw, Mok, how do you see things?
Yeah, actually, mahirap yung tanong mo, Dot, no? Kung may masama bang technology, social media sa technology, is it good or is it bad, no? I can't help but recall the thinker I work on, no, for my studies, no? There are three possible attitudes towards technology, no? First is positive, you praise it, it's like heaven sent. The other extreme would be negative, no? That is a work of the devil, we have to get rid of technology.
We become technophobic.
That's right. No, you have communities like Amish, no, sa US. No, they deliberately try to to refrain from using technology, the modern technology. Like Jonah, sorry, I have to refer to the thinker I work on, Heidegger. Said actually the attitude that is neutral, that that thinks of technology as neither good nor bad, but it depends on the user. The neutral stance is the most dangerous, no, of the three possible. No?
Elaborate on that. Bakit neutral
Let's say,
stance yung pinakadelikado?
sa US, di ba, the gun debate, no? Sabi nila, well, guns themselves don't kill. No? It depends on who use. No? So, in other words, neutral yung gun. No? But the very presence of a technology such as gun, no, influences our behavior. No?
Right.
Think also of the may di ba news about yung nanagasa na nakakotse, no?
Yeah.
We behave differently when we use a car, no? In public space, no? And also pag SUV, no? And makita mo heavily tinted black, no? Pag nagbisikleta ka, nag-iiba din, no? Kasi walang aircon, walang distance, bumabati ka sa mga tao, no? So hindi neutral yung technology, and social media is the same, I think, no? It would be dangerous to think. I agree with Heidegger, no? To think of social media like IG and Facebook and TikTok, no? To be neutral. It depends on who uses it, no? The technology itself seems to direct us to a certain kind of behavior, and I think we should look into that.
That's a very important point you made, Mo. It reminds me of an idea in communications that I picked up from college years a long time ago. I think it was by Marshall McLuhan, that the medium is the message. I think that's the way the phrase or the sentence goes. At malaki yun, pareho sa sinasabi mo, may nagagawa ang isang instrumento, isang medium. The minute you put it within human society, it does affect human behavior.
Yeah.
So let's quickly evaluate or comment on the human behavior that is now, a lot of people are saying it's now the predominant behavior when it comes to the way people use social media. And I'm talking about none other than our capacity to do with the information as we wish. Manipulate it, speak it truthfully, replace it with some other symbolisms and representations. So my question is, what is your evaluation right now of the way truth-telling is taking place among human beings who use social media? Is there even such a thing as truth-telling these days?
For some reason, the one I recall now is Imelda. She famously said, no, if you watch the documentary, that truth is not real, no? Perception is. No? Parang thesis statement yun, actually, ang galing niya. No? But that's very telling, no? That these days, no, it's we live in a very critical and I might say also dangerous times when perception is everything, no? And truth is something that can be dispensed with. No? And I think that's, when it comes to ethics of communication, we need to, I think, confront that question. Do we agree with that thesis statement? No? Totoo ba na ang katotohanan ay hindi kasing halaga ng kung ano yung nakikita, no, perception. So,
and when we say that, of course we're standing on the basis that there is still a need and there is still a value in speaking the truth. But is there, in today's day and age, or is it not just about information, data?
I've been thinking about that. That's a brilliant question when you ask, is truth-telling still relevant today? What if we were to reverse it and say that maybe today there's something that we have to preserve in error, in claiming that something is in error. Conceptually, truth is philosophical. I hope you don't mind, diba? It's
Go for it. That's why we're
conventionally
here, yeah.
saying what it is, that it is. Correspondence.
Conventional
it's
understanding.
if it's a cup, then it's a cup.
If
You
it's
say
red, it's red.
Yeah. If I say, for example, this is a giraffe, I'll be in error. I think there's some value today in preserving the capacity to speak error. Does that make sense? I'm saying it for the first time. I don't know how it sounds. But the capacity to claim that something or someone is in error. A claim is mistaken. I like the distinction between, I have a friend from a colleague, an ethics teacher also from California, si Carlo Carrascoso. He often likes to use capital T, capital letter and small t. I think he draws it from Heidegger. Mm-hmm. There's a distinction we can make between capital T truth, and it's something that should be able to bind us. When I say this is a cup, we can't just in an interpretation say that it's a giraffe or some other thing. Versus what we can call a lowercase t truth. When that refers to something more perspectival, something more about what people's opinions are. I know that we make I'm not saying that small t truth is opinion. I'm just saying that maybe there's something to be respected in what people claim to be their truth. Some of our colleagues have actually, in a sarcastic way during conversations, I'm not sure in other conversations you've heard people say, sige nga, ano ba yung truth mo? And the tone is almost derisive, yung truth mo. And in that case, it's something that I think dogmatic. I mean, I think what authoritarian regimes have, maybe it's a result of when authoritarian regimes try to oppress people's perspectives in the context of a bigger narrative that they impose on people. So that's why maybe there's something to be preserved in the perspectives of individuals. But like I said, I think the two, we should make a distinction between the two, and that the first one allows us to speak about error. For example, to be concrete, there are people who make claims that there is no climate change. There are people who claim that the Holocaust never happened. There are people who claim, can I say it from a local perspective, that martial law was a golden age. We should be able to, in a discursive, safe space, be able to talk about what's truth and error, capital T, truth and error in that context, above and beyond just the, my truth or my opinion in that case. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, gusto ko yung focus ni-stress ni John yung my truth, no? So, is there such a thing as my truth or merong the truth, no? Capital T or small t, no? I think John started to refer to something that is important, no? That I think we should look into, that has to do with respect for other people, no? Kasi if I lie to someone, if I give someone false information, no?
Or fake news.
No? It's because I have some objective in mind that I can achieve only by way of deceiving someone else. No? But what does it mean? That means that other person I'm lying to does not deserve correct information. No? Ako lang. No? Yeah. Because I have my goals. No? Yeah. And when I do that, I'm disregarding the goal of the other person. No? Kaya when I think of truth, without getting into heavy philosophy, no, to make it really concrete and practical, no? Lahat kasi tayo, meron tayong objectives. We all have goals and objectives in life, no? And I think when we begin from a stance of respect, I respect you, you have your goals, no? For us to achieve our goals, we need correct information. Once we circulate or provide false information, people will not be able to achieve their goals. No? Kasi mali yung information nila. And that's the thing. No? We need to think of truth in terms of our interconnectivity as a human community and respect for everyone, that we all have goals and we need correct and true, no? Information for us to achieve our goals. Kasi alam mo, even liars would demand correct information. Trolls, no? The trolls don't realize that the phones they use were made because people studied, researched on the electronics.
They will demand truth.
They will demand truth.
Expect truth.
Yeah. Or a troll will demand, okay, you pay me 500 or whatever.
And to be truthful about the payment.
To be truthful about the payment.
That's true. Yes,
so,
yes, yes.
A criminal organization functions, becomes successful because they have correct information.
So sinasabi mo, Mok, patuloy na may pagpapahalaga ang mga taong katulad natin sa katotohanan.
Yes.
Hindi nawawala yun.
Hindi nawawala.
Not even the social media platforms would be powerful enough to take that away from people's fundamental valuing. We do value the truth.
Yes.
You mentioned respect. That's another value that I dare say all people expect from others. I expect that you respect me, respetuhin mo ako, respetuhin din kita. I just like to ask for your comments on the way respect, or another word for it could be perhaps kindness towards others. When we communicate, which is basic, that it's disappearing from the social media world, the public sphere through social media, with the emergence of habitual bashing from people. It's so easy to do that nowadays. I don't know kung kayo nabash na ba kayo sa mga pinopost nyo sa, lalo na kung ang pinost nyo medyo may political aspect to it. And then, quite recently, the emergence of trolls who are for hire, basically. How do we pursue respect in this case?
Yeah, that's, well, let's hear.
Wow.
John, what do you think?
Dapat ko bang respetuhin yung taong nag-bash sa akin? O sabayan ko na lang, mag-bash na lang?
I wish that I could go to Mercury Drug and buy a pill. I've said this several times already. I wish I could go to Mercury Drug, buy a pill, for example, self-knowledge, respect.
Tapos pasok tayo sa Matrix, all of us. We enter the Matrix.
Buy a pill and then give it to someone or give it to myself, and suddenly I have respect as a character trait. And I am respectful to other people. Or the thing is, respect, these values, these character traits have to be cultivated in the long term. So when we ask the question, how do we create a culture that has more respect? I think that's a desirable end goal. One of the values that I think that we want to cultivate. It goes back to that question about character formation and how we affirm each other, how we deny each other's behavior. So. As Momok said earlier, it's such a complex issue, but it's desirable. And I love that we're bringing up the issues of these values of parang the communication environment should have these values. Pero hindi . And I think that's ironic and sad. And I find it even more ironic because our young people have a greater sense of social justice now . And at the same time, there's the phenomenon of the trolls that you, Momok, mentioned earlier. Parang, how do you reconcile that? A stronger sense for social justice, people, respect, discrimination. My son is 18 and he has a strong sense. We did not have this when I was younger. A strong sense against sexism, against the patriarchy, against all of these values that we have to contend with now.
So values are being shaped as we speak through the use of social media.
Yes.
Magday sinabi ni John gusto ko lang tignan yon ng mas malalim. Sa usapin ng character formation, of course, we always say in our ethics classes that being ethical is a matter of cultivation. It's a matter of formation. But what do you say of the character of the Filipino people these days in connection with the fact, big T, the fact that majority of the Filipino people, or millions of Filipinos, 31 plus million, voted for a candidate for the highest office in the country, knowing so many things about that candidate that would tend to be negative. What does that say about the Filipino people's character these days? So,
Dot, you really want to get...
Maaari kayong mamiloso po.
Dot, you really want to go down that rabbit hole, huh?
Mamiloso po na tayo. Ano ang puna ninyo?
Are you sure we want to enter this discussion?
Yeah, I think that's necessary naman. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, John, you might have something to say now. Yeah.
At gusto ko yung apprehension mo, John. Gusto ko yung anxiety that the question triggered.
Because if we're talking about respect, Dot, I think there's something important about the Jesuits calling us to bridge the cultural divide. And we've heard it many times already. Now we know. I love it when Father Nebres, in candid conversations, will tell us that we don't understand the poor. It's in that context that he calls us na parang we're doing research, we're doing all of this highfalutin. I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing the institution, I'm just following Father Nebres when he says, in a self-critical moment, we're devoting so much time discussing, doing research, but we're still detached, disengaged. Hindi tayo nakalublob. Our language, even the songs that we sing, yung bumaba ka sa bundok, na kinakanta sa high school, or sa misa. Parang, I think there's something valuable and important when Father Nebres says that. And if we feel, I'm sorry, it's a sensitive issue eh. If at a certain point, and I'll talk about myself na lang, if I feel that I don't understand how 31 million could have voted for X person, I don't want to be red tagged. Maybe it says something about me. It says something about the context that I don't understand. My own context that's detached, that's insulated. So I think the first step for me personally is a desire to genuinely respect and understand the 31 million. And for me, there are two ways to look at it. On the one hand, to say, okay, that's their small t truth, di ba?
Okay.
And in that particular context, maybe I'm mistaken in their choice. Maybe martial law was a golden age. Maybe it's and ... and so on and so forth. On the other hand, can I refer back to that point about the myth of the cave, the allegory of the cave by Plato? I don't want to make this a truth claim on my part, but I start with that question. Maybe it's not the entire 31 million. Maybe a large portion of the 31 million who voted were, I have to be careful about the words, were people inside the cave looking at shadows, and there were puppeteers behind them holding up artifacts through TikTok, through Facebook, through these social media, creating a certain, and then I have to insert this point there. I have a memory of asking Rowie Azada Palacios many years ago, even before 2012, I think, or 2013, I asked, because the Golden Age narrative was already being weaved at that time, and I asked her, how can there be people who think that martial law, because in our context, it's unthinkable. She said herself, textbooks have been modified systematically to depict that age as golden. And so let's just finish the point
and
there.
That's a matter of fact.
And in that particular context, I cannot reconcile myself with those two possibilities. On the one hand, did a substantial part of them, not all of them, vote because they were inside a cave looking at shadows that were being caused and manipulated? Or did they genuinely, rationally, from an enlightened, autonomous perspective, choose this candidate.
But is there no responsibility on the side of people who see perhaps a bigger truth, a bigger picture of the truth? What about the big letter T, the big truth that we're talking about? If 31 million Filipinos, we can argue, have been manipulated, is there no value in being responsible towards them and correcting them? Or is that being narcissistic? Is that being just hubris and it's just bogus and false?
Yeah. So, thank you, Dot, for those questions. But I'd like to link that question to, I think, an important point that John raised earlier, yung the listening. And I think really, I agree completely with what John said, referring to Father Nebres also, that what we need to learn is to listen. We're not good listeners.
Yeah.
So actually, I'd like to avoid now speaking of 31 and versus 15 million.
Agree.
At the end of the day, it's the individual. I mean, we can hide behind numbers like 15 million or 31 million. I have very good friends and relatives who voted for persons that I consider unthinkable. But so it's hard for me to reconcile that. But these are real persons. So I need to learn how to understand and listen also. But it should not prevent me also from demanding also or requesting that you should also listen to what I'm saying. Because I had a concrete experience in chat groups with my former high school classmates, and some of them really were really hard and hardcore, BBM or DDS even. And I discovered, talaga ang lakas ng emotions, and so it's not really so much a question of truth now, but what they feel strongly about. And everyone can feel very strongly about something, setting aside the question of truth. And we need to learn what makes people feel strongly about something, without judging muna, and take it from there. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's necessary to do that.
Well and good. Well and good. Kung ang truth-telling, pagkasabi ng totoo at pagbibigay respeto sa ibang tao ay mga pagpapahalaga natin. We often teach that to our students here in Ateneo. One of the things that we also emphasize in our ethics courses, the way we think about ethics here, is the fact that reason has a very important role to play in our ethical actions. When we are in a dilemma, for example, we need to use reason. We always say that, di ba? Kailangan marunong din tayo mga tuwiran, marunong mag-isip. Quickly comment on this. How are we doing as a people when it comes to reasoning?
Momok, I like what you said about listening to how people feel. Because it's so easy for philosophers in an insulated institution like Ateneo to begin just imposing a certain paradigm or a certain, fancy, sophisticated philosopher. And this is one of the virtues of the Jesuits that that always impresses me. You begin with context. So I find it interesting. With that distinction between capital T and the small t, truth as some metaphysical, parang something that we can refer to, and then we're subordinate to, and when you say in the recent correspondence you read that this is a cup, and then no one can dispute that this is a cup and not a giraffe. There was this comment in the magisterial lecture I gave about the ontology that really hit me. It was a fantastic comment that I did not address during the lecture. The comment was, because I was talking about
and the ontology, of course, by that we mean duty-based ethics.
Duty-based ethics.
You do the right thing is based on your duty.
Yes. And in that context, truth-telling is a duty. There was this comment there. But whose truth are you talking about? bang, tama sa akin. Ang lakas kasi, syempre, it's so easy for me to talk about truth, capital T, that we have a duty to tell
I
the
get
truth
what
and
you're
so on and
saying.
so
At
forth.
kaninong katotohanan ang duty-bound kang suportahan?
My answer to the question, and I'll refer to our friend Gus Rodriguez for this. Discourse. It's in actually coming to terms with how history will reveal what is truth.
So, reason should be standing on discourse, John?
If I were, sorry, I'll pepper it with some, I think Hegel, will say that.
Bago ka mga tuwiran, kailangan munang may pag-uusap.
Hindi ba
Kailangan munang may
lumalabas
diskurso.
yung katotohanan dun sa diskurso? On so many contemporary philosophers' contexts, hindi ba lumalabas yung katotohanan? Hindi dahil may isang monarchy, hindi dahil may isang authority figure na paternalistic context na nagpapataw. Ito kasi ang katotohanan. Kung hindi lumalabas yung katotohanan sa lipunan mismo, sa katagalan ng kasaysayan.
Ang malaman yung sinabi ni John. I know that you have written a number of articles touching on the political. Could you just quickly comment on John's position, especially when it comes to political pragmatism, political realities? More concretely, anong gagawin natin kung halimbawa yung kabilang grupo, yung kabilang ibang mga tao, hindi pareho sa pagpapahalaga natin, hindi pareho ang tingin nila sa katotohanan? Are we really living in an age where there's just a multiplicity of perspectives?
Mahirap na tanong na yan, no?
Ayun, tanggapin na lang natin.
Yung wala na bang katotohanan, no? Well, muli, no, gusto ko ibalik palagi sa practical, no? Halimbawa, yung sa pandemic, di ba? Nakakagamot ba talaga yung ivermectin o hindi? No? Di ba? May kumakalat na balita. Siyempre, sino bang papakinggan mo? Yung may nag-aaral, no? Hindi ka pwedeng basta magkalat ng balita na, ito, nakakagamot itong produktong ito, no? Na basta mo sabihin na lang, no? So, mahalaga yung diskurso, pero kailangan nitingnan saan nanggagaling yung diskurso, no? Sino ba yung may, halimbawa, kung ang tanong, yung martial law years ba ng dating Pangulong Marcos, ito ba ay golden years ba o hindi? Umunlad ba ekonomiya? Siyempre, papakinggan natin yung mga economists din. Hindi ibig sabihin na sila lang palaging tama. Palagi din, meron ding pwede rin nating tanungin sila. Di ba? Pag ikaw ay pasyente sa ospital, siyempre, ang may alam yung doktor. Pero hindi ibig sabihin, bilang pasyente na wala akong alam sa medisina, hindi ko pwedeng questionin yung doktor. Pwede rin akong mukhang mali yung ginagawa. Di ba? Kaya pwede kang mag-complain. Di ba? So, yun, muli, babalik tayo sa mga praktikal na layunin. No? Bilang pasyente, may praktikal akong, it is in my interest, no, to be healed. No? And I approach an expert. But an expert can also make a mistake. No? So, tama yung sinasabi ni John, mag-usap tayo. No?
And yet, in that entire scenario, I, the patient, I am also responsible for knowing where the information is coming from.
Exactly.
May kalayaan ako mamili ng doktor.
Tama, oo.
At bahagi ng responsibilidad ko yung sarili ko, duty to myself, to also know if the doctor is saying the truth or not. And to look at other options or second opinion, perhaps. And this brings us to what could be the last question for our conversation. Sayang, no? Sana. Kung old normal to, kapi-kapi lang tayo, di ba? Mahaba yung usapan ito. Yung last question ko, muli ibabalik ko sa etika. Na foundation ng ating usapan ngayon. In ethics, we often end our courses on the topic of prescription. So, not that we are wise people, not that we have a crystal ball in front of us, but what would you prescribe should be or can be the best attitude of people who are heavily into the social media? Ano ang dapat nating pagtingin sa social media at kung posible, ano ang pinakamagandang behavior na pwede nating ipakita para nakakatulong tayo imbis na nakakasira?
Sa social media, no? Well, yung ethics, no? Ayoko din tingnan yung ethics kasi, sorry, Dot, na bilang palaging prescription lang, ano. Tinitingnan ko yung ethics higit bilang isang paraan ng pamumuhay, no? Way of life, no? At
I see.
muli, babalik ako sa practical, no? Kasi kung titingnan mo yung animal world, no? Ang mga hayop kasi tumutugon sila kung ano nakikita. Kaya gusto kong balikan sana, sorry, yung sinasabi ni John kanina, yung revealing, no? Kasi yun ang lumang salita ng katotohanan, aletheia. No? Aletheia or aletheia, revealing, no? At kung titingnan mo, ano ba yung katotohanan sa mga hayop? Lagi sila nakikipagdiskurso sa kalikasan. Uy, kung ako ibon, may uod doon. Kung ako ay honeybee, share ako ng information, ay may nectar doon. Actually, nanalo ng Nobel Prize yan, si Carl von Frisch. Na. May tinatawag na waggle dance, no? Yung beast. Pero precise information, exact location, grabe, no? May mathematical computation yung mga honeybees, no? And that depends on correct information. Kung nagsinungaling yung bee, mamamatay yung colony. That's how important truth is, no? So, yun nga, kailangan makita yung katotohanan at yung social media, no, bilang bahagi ng ating kakayahan na makamit ang ating mga hangarin sa buhay, no? At ipagpalagay na pare-pareho tayong mahalaga, no? Kapag nagbigay ako ng mali impormasyon sa ibang tao, hindi niya makukuha yung kanyang So, yun nga yung interconnected tayong lahat, no? So one fake news, one false news will destroy a community. Kaya yun nga, the colony of bees, their very survival depends on correct information to exactly know where the nectar is. No? It's amazing, no? The animal world.
At siguro, nagsisimula doon ng lahat ng effort na to. No? Simulan sa pagkilala, the awareness that we all have something to do with the social media.
Yes.
John, you'll have the last word.
No, I'd like you to have the last word in that context because you're also an ethics teacher, Dot. So I'll answer the question directly. Anong prescription? One, if this message has nothing to do if you're a paid troll. But if you are sincere and you want to do social media content creation honestly, sincerely, with an earnest approach towards creating content, the values that we started talking about today, brilliant, diba? Respect, truth-telling, listening. Those are values I think that not just will constrain a content creator, but will be valuable for a content creator to be successful. A content creator who does not listen to an audience, who does not respect the audience, who does not... and following what Momok said there, di ba? You will give the proper information because you know very well that the truth comes out eventually. So I think it's to cultivate those values that we spoke about. And the cultivation is a long-term interaction. I love the metaphor about the bees, Momok, na parang nasa konteksto na gumagalaw ka sa isang konteksto, galangin mo yung konteksto kung saan ka gumagalaw. On the positive, respect those values. And on the negative side, I'll say, just try to cultivate yourself away from the 7 deadly sins. They're the most useful, Cultivate yourself away from pride, from envy, from lust, from these things. We're all human and we have those impulses, but to cultivate ourselves away from those things, from gluttony, from avarice, I think will make us more successful and happier. Which is after all what ethics intends. I don't like it when people depict ethics as a prescription that's constraining na parang, ay, susunod na naman ako sa batas. I like the way Momok describes ethics as something that, according to our objectives, and the objectives, after all, are success and happiness.
It's all about the pursuit of the good life.
Of the good life.
With that,
Yes.
I want to thank you, Momok and John, for joining me in this conversation, yung diskurso na nagawa natin. In this conversation, we talked about the importance of, and the reality, that the social media is here to stay. It's here to stay. It is part of our world in the here and now. But what's more important is how we use social media. And perhaps in our common pursuit of what's good for everyone, for our families, our friends, our society, what's important is that we get to contribute to this ongoing relationship with social media, our ongoing relationship with our technology, our machines, our digital platforms, and to hope that our contributions will be of value over the long term. This is Dennis Temporal, thanking you for joining us. Please take care.